All right, Billy, I will hand it over to you.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Lauren, and thank you all for um, being part of this training. And I'll talk a little bit about myself and also the training. But my name is Billy Parker. I'm Executive Director for Chandler Gilbert Arc in Chandler, and we work with individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities by providing housing, employment, adult day services, transportation, and mobility management. And we've been in business since 1975, so this is a big year for us. We're coming up on our 50th anniversary, so we're already starting to talk about what are we going to do for 50 years. So to celebrate our 50 years. So I've been with the organization for 31 years. Started in 1994, worked in different areas of the organization, staff training, community living, day services, employment, actually all of the departments that work directly with the individuals that we support, and became the director of operations eventually, and then also became the executive director in 2013. So I'm about 11 years into, or 12 years into being the executive director as well. Throughout that whole time, I have been submitting 5310 grant proposals, and that actually started, I believe, in 1994. So I have 30 years worth of also doing 5310 proposals. Of course, back when it was ADOT, and there's been many different iterations of the 5310 program and the grant process, and it's been really nice to kind of see how it's changed and evolved and things like that. I've been a mobility manager, a sub-regional mobility manager, since I believe 2014, so going on 11 years. Mobility management is really a team effort here at our organization, but I'm certainly the sort of the figurehead of mobility management, and I represent the agency from mobility management perspective. So with that, really, the reason I was asked to do this training, and I've done this training, is that we as an organization have had real significant successes in the submission of 5310 proposals. Through the years, we had a real good relationship with ADOT, City of Phoenix, MAG, and we've been business partners for a really long time. And so I was asked to sort of share some of my knowledge in doing the proposals. I think this will be the third year that I did not do the proposal. Our director of operations, Michael Miller, now takes the lead on the proposals. But up until that time, I was also the person that submitted all the proposals. And so Michael and I still work very closely together on them. And being a sub-regional mobility manager really sort of keeps me and keeps our organization really in touch with the process and procedures and how the whole program works and how important it is. So so it's been a really successful relationship that we've had, and I'm very happy to share any kind of tips that I can maybe provide going through this. The majority of what's going to happen with this training today, it's really intended to be interactive. And so I know Lauren mentioned ask your questions at the end, but if you have a question during the time I'm talking, please feel free to raise your hand, or please feel free to, ask if you can speak or whatever. And I'm happy to answer questions. There may be people involved in this training that have never done a 5310 proposal, and maybe other people that have had a lot of experience doing it. So I'd really like to try to advise everybody as well as I can and try to offer you any kind of tips that I can throughout all of this training. In addition to that, there are some of also my colleague um, um, mobility managers. I see Dawn is here and I see Justin. I saw Justin somewhere also here. So those guys may also sort of chime in and have information that they'd like to share as well. So and so they can also sort of assist in any kind of questions anybody has. So please don't feel free really to chime in and ask questions at any time. So next slide, please.
Dawn has her hand raised.
Oh, okay. Go, Dawn.
Hey, Lauren, the chat's disabled. So can you undisable it so we can put like our contact info and stuff in it?
Yes, I can. Thank you for letting me know.
No problem.
Also, that's what that little gold hand is. That means your hand's up. Okay, good. I'll know that next time.
Really, I just learned that too recently.
Well, always a new day when you're working on Zoom, I guess. Okay,
Dawn, can you confirm that it's working now?
It is.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan.
great. Okay, one more slide too, Lauren, please. Okay, so when I was putting this PowerPoint together, which was a few years ago, I contacted Wendy Miller and I said, so what are some of the issues that you run into with people that submit grant proposals? What kind of items come up on those that are challenging for you? And this is the list of stuff that she gave me. So inadequate or poor description of product details, need, or purpose, providing too much background info and not enough detail in a concise manner, lack of coordination, activities, or failure to list those activities, presenting new or quote unquote creative project ideas without meeting with Meg/Phoenix for technical assistance, cutting and pasting the same information from year to year with no updates. I know that's a biggie. I've heard about that one plenty of times. And a lack of understanding of the federal requirements. So, you know, these are all items that have been identified specifically by people that look at the 5310 applications. And so they really sort of act as a good guide for sort of putting an umbrella over some of the really vital parts of doing the application. And again, some of the ones, so for example, the lack of coordination activity or failure to list those activities. Coordination, I think, can sometimes really be sort of a gray area in terms of what does coordination mean? You know, oftentimes I think sometimes you think of coordination and you think coordination means I have to meet with somebody, I have to coordinate something, you know, we have to have something really that we can put on paper and that we met and somebody borrowed my van or I gave somebody a ride or something like that. And so it really helps to kind of look at ways of broadening the definition of coordination and consider the fact that you're at this training today, this is coordination, for example. So anytime you're really doing anything in the spirit of working together with other organizations or gaining information about coordination can really help. So again, I mentioned the cut and paste thing. That's huge. Understanding the federal requirements, there's a lot to it for sure, especially for someone who's never done it before. The one thing that I will tell you is that the folks at the City of Phoenix are really helpful with sharing that information if you have questions and if you need support. When in the early days when we were doing proposals, we've always felt like we had a place to go to get our questions answered. And the longer you do it, the more it all sort of really comes together and makes sense. So again, I'll bounce back to the top. Providing too much background info and not enough detail in a concise manner. Detail is really important. I'm going to be saying this probably throughout this training today, but when you consider the people that are reviewing your application, it's not their only job. And it also may be people that don't understand possibly the language that you use in your particular industry, whether you're working in behavioral health or whether you're working in intellectual and developmental disabilities. The world is filled with acronyms. So you have to be really careful about speaking to your audience too, and considering who's looking at this application. One, how much time do they have? And two, how much do they know about your particular industry? And so kind of looking at all that is all really important. So next slide. Okay, so we'll talk about clarity first. Again, as I was just mentioning, there could be a real variety of people reading your proposal that are on the committee, and they may be people that work in an industry that's not your industry, and may not understand completely what your need is or who your clientele are that you're providing the service to. And so it becomes your job as part of the proposal to really clarify that in a way that anybody can understand. So just again, to go on, if you're working with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, you should probably somewhere in your proposal have something to help define what a person with an intellectual and developmental disability is, or what part of that diagnosis is, just to kind of get the person that's reviewing your application to sort of understand that. Okay. What's your ask? Be clear, be specific. How are you stating your ask? And how does it align with the proposal language? If you look at the proposal, and I'll be talking about this throughout this training today too. How does your ask align with the proposal language? What is the actual language that's on the proposal in the paragraphs that talks about, you know, there's a paragraph that says, this is what we need. This is the information that we need you to respond to. If there's certain language used in that paragraph, use that same language in your response. It helps in a number of ways. It helps for it to be clear. And oftentimes too, when a person's reviewing your proposal, there are certain pieces of the paragraph that of the request that they want to make sure are being addressed. And if you address them verbatim, then they know that that's being addressed. They know that that's the part. There's nothing they have to figure out. And we'll talk more about that as we move along with this. But, you know, if it's a question about coordination and, you know, who are you going to coordinate with, or how are you going to coordinate, you know, use the word coordinate in your answer so that it's not something that has to be assumed. It's something that's stated really clearly. And does your infrastructure support state and federal requirements? So if you're somebody that's not applied for 5310 in the past, it's really good to kind of be aware of what the state and federal requirements are. Be really aware of what your responsibility will be if you're granted capital or operating or mobility management funding or preventative maintenance or any of that. You know, be clear on what your responsibilities are that come along with that. And that's somewhere along the line in this training, there's sort of an incomplete list of that I'll talk about. Next slide, please. Okay. Consistency is another thing that's important. Is your proposal consistent from one end to the other? If somebody's reading toward the very end of your proposal, is it going to be sort of melding with what's in the beginning of the proposal? And the thing that really helps, I have found that really helps with that is that if you work for an organization, and you wouldn't be here in this training if you didn't, and you're applying for a 5310 proposal, your organization has a mission. It has a mission statement. You have a set of priorities. You have all of that. That's really a good way for your proposal language to sort of revolve around your mission and what you're about. So if your mission is about, independence and self-determination and community access, use those terms, and use those terms as a reason why it's important for you to make this request, and why it's important, why you need a vehicle, or why you need preventative maintenance dollars or something like that, because it will help you to fulfill your mission. And then that piece of it can kind of always be sort of present in the proposal language that you have. Do all sections tie together? Again, it's really important to kind of look at, I know I've talked about this in the past, and I know that Dee Dee has talked about it, and the cover letter is a really important aspect of your proposal, and it's sort of what ties it all together. The cover letter is sort of a summation of everything that's in your proposal, all done on one page, which can sometimes be tricky, especially if you're somebody like me that likes to write. So, but your sections really want to tie together and be really consistent, just like it says in the first bullet point. Is your ask able to be articulated by the reader? Again, be really careful about language, and be really careful about acronyms and different things like that. I mean, we all have language that when we're in a certain industry, we all have kind of language that makes sense to us, but it might not make sense to everybody. So it's really important to consider that. Does the information tie back to your priorities? Again, that's when I was talking about your mission, your priorities, what drives you, your strategic plan, all of that should tie together. Avoid referencing previous statements, instead restate. Again, the reason I wrote that too is anybody that reviews these proposals could tell you, and Matthew, you'd probably be somebody that could speak to that, but when it comes time to review the proposals, there's a group of people and they have to do a whole bunch of proposals in a pretty short amount of time. And so expecting someone to remember something that you had written earlier in the proposal is sometimes maybe not the best idea. It's a lot easier to just restate it, and so that the message continues to move in that direction. Anybody have any questions so far? Okay, next slide. Okay, optimism and reality. Again, keep your proposal real, keep it optimistic. I mean, I know that there have been times when, people have talked about, if we don't get this van, we're not going to be able to continue to operate, or we have to have this money, kind of really setting sort of a bleak outcome if they don't get awarded versus a really optimistic outcome if they do. That really helps. Nobody likes to feel like they're being backed into a corner if they're reviewing your application. So be optimistic about your proposal and about your ask, and also be real about it. Make sure that you can really justify your ask. Does your ask align with your priorities? When you think about your priorities, again, if your priorities are community access, and your priorities are self-determination and independence, and all of those kind of things that talk about people being part of their community, make sure that that continues to be present in your proposal language. What are your goals behind the ask? A lot of times it really helps to kind of set the stage for what your ask is, and that's oftentimes part of what's on your cover letter too. It talks about, you know, why is that you're asking to begin with? What's your plan? Are you asking for a vehicle because you have vehicles that are old and you want to retire them? Are you expanding your program? Are you making some kind of a change that are you opening a new program? You know, all kinds of different things. So if you kind of look at your goal behind the ask, really to kind of really create an idea like, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is what we're asking for, this is why we're asking for it, and this is what we expect to have happen if we are granted the funding or capital or preventative maintenance or whatever. Answering what you will do. Well, does your proposal reflect fiscal year happenings? Again, that's another thing. You know, what's going on at any given time. If your proposal reflects fiscal year happenings, that usually means that you're not cutting and pasting from the previous year, because you're talking about stuff that's going on this year, or stuff that that happened last year and that you're expecting to happen this year. So it sends a real clear message that you're not just taking information from last year's proposal and pasting it in there. You might be pasting some general information, but you're always going to look at every section and think, what is it that's going on this year, or that has happened in the past year that really will make this a contemporary application. And so that's real important to put in there too. Answering what you will do if not funded. It's really a good idea to kind of take a look at that and again, be optimistic about it. If you're not funded, that doesn't mean that you won't open your program. It probably means something more like, you will look at making modifications to the program so that we can continue to offer the great service that we're providing, or we'll look at alternative sources of revenue in order to be able to continue to move forward with this. So that's what it means to be optimistic with your ask. And I feel like I can't really say enough about that. I think that's a really important part of it. You know, especially if you're an organization that's been around for a long time like us, it's like, if we're not funded, we're not going to close. But if we are funded, this is what's going to happen. This is how good it's going to be for us, you know. And so kind of really looking at that kind of optimism but also being real about it at the same time. So next slide. Is it sensible? Is it defensible? Okay, so really, the thing to look at is, if the questions are asked about the degree of need, are you able to answer them? So, you know, really, if you're asking for something, make sure that you can, if somebody calls you up on the phone and says, this is what I'm reading in your proposal, what do you mean by that? What's your action plan? What are you going to do if you are granted whatever it is that you're asking for? Why are you asking for it? How are you, is it reasonable? Also, can you defend it? How defensible does your ask need to be? And how will you defend it if asked? Do you have data to defend your application statements and notes reflecting your answers? One of the practices that I do and have always done is I have documents and folders for years and years of doing grants that are usually called something like chicken scratch. But what they will be is if I come up with an idea or I have a thought or there's something about the proposal that is important that I remember in the event that I need to defend my ask in some way, I can go back to those notes that I've kept and kind of rehash that or restate any kind of a statement that I made, or also defend a statement that I've made because I wrote it down. Same thing with particular asks. You know, if you preventative maintenance is a great example. Because PM oftentimes really revolves around numbers. So if you have a certain amount that you had budgeted for maintenance on your vehicles, and this is how much it costs, and this is how much you need, and this is the age of your vehicles, and this is how much the costs are, this is the change in costs as time goes on. All of that stuff is really good to write down and to have available to your, you know, in case somebody asks you. Oftentimes, if there are questions about your proposal, they'll be sent to you in advance and then you can access that. But you should always be prepared to answer anything about the proposal just off the cuff if you can. So just in the event that that would happen. So any questions so far? Okay. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, specificity and language. So if a question asks for a specific response, address that verbatim. And so again, I talked about that a little bit before, but again, measurable indicators is a great one because there's a question somewhere in that proposal that says, what are your measurable indicators? And you can answer that. But if you answer that and say, our measurable indicators are blah, blah, blah. Again, the folks that are reviewing your application are probably going to look at that question, look at that term measurable indicators, and then look and see where in your response you address it. You know, there could be a whole bunch of other stuff that you talk about in there. And it can be easy for a person to not find the measurable indicator. But if you state it as a measurable indicator, they'll know that the words following that term measurable indicator is your answer to that specific question. So again, coordination activities is another example. Best practices is another example. So anytime you're doing the proposal and a request is made for a specific response or a specific term is used like that, it's a really good idea to answer that question verbatim in that way and then go into whatever detail. So any questions on that one? That's a big one for me. Okay. Use language understood by people outside your industry. Remember that? So a lot of times what I do, like we work with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll say intellectual and developmental disabilities and then IDD. And then I'll say it later and then I'll say IDD. And then in between there, when you're talking about the folks that you serve, you can say people with IDD or program members with IDD or something like that. So sometimes, you know, the language, the acronyms are important to use. If you're going to use them, make sure that you indicate what they refer to So a person doesn't have to wonder or doesn't have to ask. You have it indicated. So, and again, use language understood by people outside your industry. You don't really know everybody on the proposal committee. You don't know what their skill set is. You don't know what their interest is. You don't know what their priorities are. And, you know, there's a whole lot of things that you don't know about them. So you're really addressing a group of people that understand transportation and understand the 5310 program, but maybe don't understand your agency and don't understand what your needs are. So your job is to really sort of articulate that as part of your proposal, and you know, keep the questions at a minimum if you can. So again, transportation language is okay, because the one common thread for people that are reviewing your proposal is they understand 5310, they understand transportation. And it's good to look at the regional coordination plan and look at some of the language that is on that, some of the priorities that are part of that coordination plan, because that does a couple things. It tells people that are reviewing your proposal that you're paying attention to sort of the big picture of the 5310 program. And also, just like any industry, if you speak to somebody using industry terms, it's oftentimes better understood. So if you start talking about, you know, if you use language that's part of the coordination plan, your chances are very good that that's going to be understood. If you use language that's very specific to your own industry, it may or may not be understood. So just stuff to keep in mind. Any questions? Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so the totality of the ask. I talked a little bit ago about some of the stuff that you should be aware of that goes along with being a 5310 section 5310 recipient. Okay, there are certain limits, insurance limits, that you have to have if you make a capital request. SAM, which is System for Award Management, that's a federal program. That's how we're paid, is through SAM. And that is SAM is really kind of hard to set up at first, but once you have it set up, it's not too bad maintaining it. I actually redid our SAM renewal yesterday. It was coming up due, I think, in a month or so, and so it wasn't too bad, but I've done it like 15 times. Milestone progress reporting, that's a biggie. That happens at the end of the year, where there's all kinds of, it's this sort of whole package of your entire transportation program, and your agency talks about a lot of the stuff that's on here in terms of federal requirements, in terms of inspections, accident reporting, and Title VI. A lot of that stuff is all part of the milestone progress report that you do, which gives a summary of your transportation activities throughout the last year. And then comes along with that, all the insurance requirements and different things like that are all part of that whole package, which is the milestone progress report. And that's a significant task. There's a lot of pieces to it, but it's something that once you sort of understand that language, it becomes something that's manageable. Title VI, that's a federal program that you're also required. Agencies have to be Title VI compliant for transportation, for the transportation they provide. So that means that your vehicles have to have Title VI notices, complaint forms, complaint procedures, and different things like that have to be in your vehicles, and also at your site, your main administration sites. And then your total Title VI plan has to be redone every 3 years. That's another thing that, actually, I just submitted our next Title VI plan because our last time was 2022, so it was due in 25. And it has been approved. It's just waiting for our board to approve it. So, again, that becomes a program that you'll get a lot of support from the Title VI folks at the City of Phoenix. There's a lot of templates out there that they can assist you with, and answer questions and things like that. And once you have your Title VI plan built, it's just really a matter of making sure that all your information remains current or any of it needs to be changed, and then redoing your plan. ADA plan, same thing. Notices, you have to have notices out there available to people, complaint forms, different things like that. Your website, if your agency has a website, it has to be on your website. So that's all important stuff that are all part, again, of being a 5310 recipient. Federal inspections, all 5310 vehicles have to have federal inspections. And there are organizations out there or repair facilities that are qualified to do federal inspections. Our agency, for example, uses Copper State Auto, who we've worked with for years and years, and they are qualified to do the federal inspections. There are a number of different places you can go, and I'm sure other people can speak to that. Justin, I know that you guys have, I don't think you guys use the Copper State, but lots of different people use different organizations to make sure the federal inspections get done. But that's something that has to be done. It's part of the requirement. And that's something that is that's audited as part of the milestone progress report. Repair and maintenance requirements, again, repair and maintenance is really important. It's a federal asset. And so when you have a federal asset, you have to follow the manufacturer's recommended intervals for any of your maintenance that you do, or you kind of really just have to do what the federal government says in terms of repair and maintenance of your vehicles. If they get in an accident, oil changes, accident reporting, lift cycling, there's all kinds of different parts to the federal inspection and the repair and maintenance requirements that you have to do, and that have to be documented and have to be submitted and provided and different things like that. So again, it's all stuff that is really reasonable, and it all goes in line with the manufacturer's suggested or recommended intervals for everything. Again, lift cycling, oil changes, different things like that. So accident reporting, there is a process for accident reporting. You have to have a system set up and a policy set up for accident reporting, and you also have to provide an accident report for qualifying accidents, and they have to be reported to the City of Phoenix as part of the federal requirement. And then you have to also follow along, and there's all kinds of criteria, like how much time is the vehicle out of service, and different things like that. In terms of repair of vehicles, that's again something that has to be reported and followed along with, again, because it is a federal asset. So it needs to either be, if it's a vehicle, it needs to either be driven or someone else needs to get it and drive it. And the whole idea behind accident reporting and repair and maintenance is to keep the vehicles on the road as long as they can and as often as they can, and making sure that you report if for some reason they're not on the road. Okay. Coordination efforts. Again, This meeting today is a coordination effort. TAP meetings, TAP stands for Transportation Ambassador Program. Those are meetings that happen quarterly. And they're usually hosted by MAG, and then we as mobility managers are usually there and have a voice in what's going on. And they're a really excellent opportunity to really connect with the transportation community and to really coordinate. Again, going to TAP meetings is a coordination effort in and of itself. If a survey comes out to you, complete it. If an inventory comes out that if people want inventory information about your 5310 fleet, complete it. If a training comes out and is available, attend it. Make sure people know that you're there and that your name is in the chat box or whatever. Because all of that stuff is documented. And when you go to do your application, your 5310 application, all of your coordination efforts they're all being paid attention to. And coordination has a particular value as part of the 5310 scoring process when you go to do your application. So it's very important, one, to not only connect with all of the coordination efforts that I have noted here, but also to really sort of think about coordination in a broad sense too. So, so that's all really helpful. And I find too that using the word coordination throughout your language in your proposal too is just good language to use, because that's a buzzword. That is a 5310 buzzword. Collaboration, coordination, you know, all of those kind of best practices, you know, all of those kind of terms are very much transportation 5310 sort of buzzwords and part of the language. So, and then probably other stuff that I haven't even thought of. You know, people that are reviewing applications may have something that they could tell me, oh yeah, you should add this. But this is all the stuff that I came up with and sort of, you know, looking at what we as an organization provide on a regular basis to make sure that we remain compliant with the 5310 program. You know, the last part about it, ask questions. I have found, especially really, and I'll do a plug for the City of Phoenix and MAG working together, which has been like 12 years or something like that. It improved a lot in terms of the dialogue, in terms of how easy it is to communicate and the collaboration that takes place. That has really improved a lot. I mean, people were available when we were applying through ADOT and looking at the program and doing the applications and asking the questions and things like that. But the cohesiveness that has been part of the relationship with the City of Phoenix taking over the 5310 program has been really positive, I think. And your questions will be answered. And so you can really rely on that. So don't hesitate to ask. Any questions? Okay. Next page. Tracking, use a team approach. So what that is about is when you really start looking at all of the 5310 requirements, they really require a team of people. So for example, trips and safety and maintenance, and we do vehicle loaning too. And so there's a group of people that sort of are responsible to make sure that if somebody is going to borrow one of our vehicles, that they have followed all of the prerequisite information that they have to provide to us, and that we have sort of a game plan in how to loan a person a vehicle. So I'll give you an example. So we were working with an organization and they wanted to borrow our vehicle, but they needed it overnight and for a few days. And so we were having to figure that out. And they were also going to return the vehicle at a time when we weren't actually open. And so, you know, as a team, then they worked with our maintenance person. We ended up getting a lockbox set up on the outside of our building, gave them the combination, and we worked out a deal to where they can drop the key off and pick the key up, and then they can have access to the yard where the vehicles are parked and different things like that. All of that stuff gets written down. And so then there's also a group of people that are meeting with people and saying, you know, here's your vehicle sharing application or your vehicle sharing agreement and things like that. And here are some of the other aspects. So when you start thinking about that, you know, you have somebody that's looking at the number of trips that you're driving by gathering your vehicle, your trip logs. You have somebody that's collecting data on your billing for preventative maintenance or billing for mobility management. You have people that are in the maintenance department that are working on that. You have people like me who go to TAP meetings and do trainings like this. And so when you start thinking about it, we have like 14 people here that all participate in some aspect of mobility management. So, so that's all real important. It's not really a one person kind of a thing. Excuse me. Next thing, set up a system to track related activities throughout the year. It's really hard to, or at least for me, it's really hard to remember, like when it comes time to do your application and you want to start talking about all the great stuff you did over the past year and you start thinking about it. Sometimes I find myself having to go back on my calendar and looking at, well, we had this many meetings and we did this and different things like that. Well, we actually have a tracking form too that we have set up. It's just an Excel document in our computer. And when some kind of an event takes place, like this training, for example, I'll go to that tracking form and write that I did this training and how long it lasted and who was part of it or whatever, different things like that. So then I can look back really easily. And they say, you know, the application says, what are some of the things that you did over the last year? I can look through in one place to see what I wrote down about all those things. And then if I need more detail about that, I have other places I can look for more specific details, but it really helps you to not miss stuff. And you really don't want to miss important things that you did to really help to validate how important your organization is and how important it would be for you to have your application granted or your ask granted. So, so again, it helps to validate your ask, and it's great for coordination questions too. If there's a question that says, what did you do to coordinate? You start looking back through and say, oh, well, I got a call from this one person. I got an email from this one person and we communicated back and forth. I gave them some ideas. You know, I asked somebody questions. I mean, anytime there's that dialogue or there's any kind of an interaction in that way, that counts as coordination. That is something that you can call coordination in your ask. You know, there are other pieces of the application that are actually part of the scoring that are part of coordination too. And that's has more to do with how many TAP meetings did you attend and how many trainings did you attend and different things like that. And that stuff is all kept track of too. And so the more involved you can be, the more you can say how involved you are, and the more sort of credit you can get for that. Hopefully that makes sense. Next page. Okay, so continuity is really important as part of the application. Ensure that all aspects of the proposal tie back to your agency mission, your strategic plan, your core values. your continuation of service, your grant guidelines, and your community or civic responsibility. Again, those, when you really think about any kind of a grant proposal that you're going to do, there has to be something that's at the core of the proposal. And we use that same tool with a lot of things that we work on within our agency, is that when we're talking about our organization, promoting our organization, or trying to make, trying to come to consensus on strategic moves that we make as an organization, it's always based on the agency mission. That's always at the center of what it is that we do. And our strategic plan is based on the agency mission as well, and as are the core values. And so looking at all that, again, it's really good. Any statement that you make, you should be able to tie it back to your mission in some way. You don't have to state it specifically every time, but you need to be able to defend that, and using your mission as your mission statement as your sort of guide to doing that. Again, looking at the grant guidelines, understanding the guidelines of the grant, make sure you read it. You read the handbook, and that you understand the guidelines of the grant so that you can speak specifically to the grant, and so that you're answering questions or using language that is very grant specific. So again, continuation of services. Again, continuation or expansion of services, different things like that, that presents, always helps to present a real optimistic view of your ask. Community and civic responsibility. Again, the 5310 program is really all about community and civic responsibility. And in considering that it relates to people with disabilities and people who are elderly. So if you kind of really look at that, and make sure that the tone of your proposal really kind of speaks to community and civic responsibility. Any questions? Okay, next slide. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about preventative maintenance, or preventive maintenance. And that is, preventive maintenance is actually a relatively new ask, a new ask, relatively speaking. And it has sort of really gained a foothold and has become a really important part of the 5310 program. And really, the nice thing about it too is really the whole idea of using the assets that you're granted to the best of their ability and as effectively and as long as you can is a really important part of the 5310 program. And so having preventative maintenance dollars available is really vital and very much appreciated. So it includes all activity, supplies, materials, labor, services, and associated costs required to preserve or extend the functionality and serviceability of the asset in a cost-effective manner. Next page. Okay, services that may qualify as preventative maintenance: oil change, tires, alignment, shock struts, maintenance subscription services, fluids, tune-up, brakes, safety equipment. So that's just some example of a few things. And there's the preventative maintenance has really sort of evolved too, which has been really positive. We did probably one of the first, well, when the preventative maintenance came available, we were one of the first organizations to actually request money, request preventative maintenance funding. And at that time, it was very much just preventative. It was not really repair. It was just preventative maintenance. So I recall the year that we did it, the first year we did it, we just did it for tires and oil changes. Because I think we might have done it for brakes too, I'm not sure, but we saw those as truly preventative maintenance issues and not repair issues. And since then, it has really expanded to where preventative maintenance really has to do with repairs and a lot of upgrades to your vehicle and different things like that. So as you can see, this is a typical list of items that qualify as preventative maintenance. On the next slide, here's some things that don't qualify or may not. Vehicle wraps, repainting just to change the color, company logo, air freshener, washes might qualify. I think they have qualified. Booster seats and fuel reimbursement, they don't qualify. The repainting one, for example, if you got in a wreck and you needed to get the vehicle fixed, you can ask for preventative maintenance to do that, or you can use your preventative maintenance dollars for the repair of your vehicle to cover your insurance deductible, for example. And if that requires that the vehicle be repainted because you had a repair, that's one thing. But you can't just say, I want to make my vehicle green now instead of red and use PM dollars for that. Again, company logo, air fresheners, booster seats, and fuel reimbursement. They're all things that don't qualify. Okay, next page. The bottom line, really just ask. If you're not sure if something qualifies for PM, ask. There's somebody that's going to be able to give you an answer about that. And again, I think that kind of like coordination, preventative maintenance is there can be, it's a term that can be relatively broad too, you know, but I think it has really, speaking for our agency, has helped us a lot to be able to apply for preventative maintenance dollars. And it's helped us to be able to continue to drive our vehicles safely and not have to ask for new vehicles, which we haven't asked for like 4 years. So, so the PM dollars have been a real big part of that, and that has really helped us a lot. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, next slide, please. And one after that. Okay, so you're a 5310 recipient. You're going to have an interview by the committee that's looked at your application. And they may have questions for you that they'll send to you in advance for you to answer in writing, or they may not, but they're going to give you an opportunity to talk about your organization. They're going to give you an opportunity to talk about your ask. They're going to want to know what you have to say about it. And again, it's not a very long interview, and they are busy people. And they really want to grant you what it is that you're asking for if it's reasonable. And so just some of the tips that I have found through the years that I think are important is sort of remember this is a volunteer group. And so they're choosing to be part of this group and choosing to do this. And so show them some gratitude. Thank them for being part of the group. Thank them for reviewing your application. If you had questions to answer, you can thank them for that. You know, the group, the program, the process, you know, again, like I mentioned earlier, you know, I have found that the 5310 process is not nearly as cumbersome as it once was. It has been refined through the years, and that's really because of people like the Elderly and Persons with Disabilities Transportation Program Committee and because of people like Lauren and Dee Dee and the folks at the city of Phoenix and different things like that. And so showing some gratitude about that is important. Stay within the time frame. You only have just so much time. They'll tell you if you're running out of time. But it's important to make sure that you get your message out there in the time that you have. Again, be specific and forward leaning. Really what that means is, be specific about what you're having to say, and then also forward leaning, meaning being optimistic. Next page. Have your details together. Have your background on your need. So, for example, you do the application, you submit the application, you have an interview a month later. Make sure that if you're going to the interview, you've refamiliarized yourself with your application. We're all really busy, and we all put our heads completely into something like this application. And then once it gets submitted, then the next thing you know, we've got 100 other things to do. And then a month later, somebody starts asking us about our application. So it's a really good idea to look at your chicken scratch, look at your application, kind of look at the questions that got asked to you, to make sure that you remember why you answered them that way. And so have those details together, have the background together on your need. Make sure, again, I'll probably sound like a broken record, the message ties back to your organizational mission, and you focus on the impact. What is this going to do for us? How will this help us? If our ask is granted, how is it going to help us? How's it going to make us better? How's it going to make us safer? How's it going to make us more successful? How is it going to prompt growth if that's what we're looking at? So again, be optimistic. The interviewers really want to support your project. So next slide. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Also, any comments from other mobility managers, things that maybe you'd like to sort of add to, or that I left out that you think is an important message for applicants?
Billy, I think you covered it really thoroughly. Very well done.
Thanks, Don. Appreciate it.
Hey, Billy, for preventive maintenance, if they keep in mind anything that prolongs the life and serviceability of the vehicle would fall under the preventive maintenance.
I like that, Justin. Thank you. I'm going to change this PowerPoint to say that. Thank you for that.
No problem.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Billy, this is Dan. Just as someone who's never went through this process before, I think that was really, really helpful. So I appreciate it.
Oh, good, Dan. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. The other part about it too that I did not bring up, we're sub-regional mobility managers and we're here to help. So if you have questions, if you're involved in doing a proposal and you're not sure about something, you can reach out to any one of us. The mobility managers now is just a general email address that the message will get to all of us. So I know Justin, for example, is much more closely tied into vehicle maintenance and understanding vehicle maintenance requirements and making sure that stuff gets done. Everybody's sort of got their their specialties in terms of us all being sub-regional mobility managers. And so we're always happy to help. It's part of what our job is. And so please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're we're happy to contact you or get back with you in any way. I don't know if there are any more slides, Lauren. Oh, yep, one more.
Just this one.
So yeah, there's there's my name, and then as you see, it just says Subregional at azmag.gov. So that means that all the subregional mobility managers will get this, and then Lauren, of course, Lauren's information is there as well. So please don't hesitate to reach out if we can help in any way. Okay, if no one else has any other questions or comments, then we can call this training done.
There are no questions in the chat box. If anyone wants to unmute and ask a question, now would be the time to do that.
Thanks again, Billy. Appreciate it.
No problem, Dan.
Yeah, Billy,
Thank
this is Matt Dudley. So I'm chair of the 5310 committee. Fantastic presentation. Yeah, and I'd just like to reiterate from Billy that, yeah, those that are evaluating, we're evaluating about anywhere between 40 to 50 grant applications through this process over the span of a few weeks. So definitely, if you can follow exactly what Billy said during this presentation, you'll be in good, fantastic shape. Thanks again, Billy.
You bet. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate you saying that. Okay, looks like we can sign off then. Thank you, everybody.